also an opportunity for us to share with you some of the preliminary strategies that we're looking to employ. It's completed and a picture is painted that we could then collaboratively sit down and work out a plan moving forward with very clear measurable benchmarks to ensure that we're able to achieve things that obviously your good selves would advise us on, and also some things that we're hoping to be able to accomplish on our side. I want to say to you that we have a very ambitious economic strategy, one that takes into consideration curtailment of our existing expenditures. And while we may be difficult in terms of reducing the actual expenditure, is to really prioritize this. And that we have a very clear idea. But obviously, our economic agenda and infrastructural agenda is going to be very large. There was a vision plan that was passed when we were in government. Six modified that vision plan where we've now said that we're going to have 4 economic zones. So our Gros-Islet and Broadway Bay is 1 economic zone. Castries is each of those zones. So the idea is that those development plans don't get lost in a national management plan, and that those economic councils will be a combination of both public sector and private sector people. In some instances, we actually are looking to declare some of those economic zones as free zones, with the idea of being able to extract a particular area of land away from the current, falls in line with that, and so does Castries. Because Castries, you have 3 major players that own the vast majority of lands in Castries. You have the City Council, you have Saint Lucia, and you have ANC. The US has developed Chapter 11. So what happens is the judge ends up becoming the board of a company, and it means that the technocrats can go to the judge and offer him a way forward in terms of restructuring. So basically, the rules of normal dated to be with us today.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister. And let me just once again, I came here on the federal farm, and I love the island from that time. And I'm very fortunate to have ended up spending most of my career working in Eastern Caribbean development here in Saint Lucia. But over a very long period of time, naturally, because that's all this is. We are also taking very careful note of the vision that we understand that you and your government have for your country. So that's a good basis on which much pleased to hear that you articulate that position. And one of the reasons we are here is the team that we have is you to be all of the expertise that you want to be able to achieve that diagnostic. And we're very pleased to hear you also, Sir Dwight, and what can I say? Timothy Antoine is a very good friend and colleague. We have a lot of respect for Tim, and he has served on our board.
Has an impact on your banking sector, which we've seen. Non-performing loans are an all-time high in this country. So those are the things that we believe that the current situation is. The question becomes, how do you resolve them without causing social distress? But the fact is that this is not sustainable, and if we don't fix it, the social problems in this country will be exasperated. It will be a disaster. When you're talking about we've been borrowing $200 million a year, and that the reserves that we had for paying off the bonds has been spent, and that almost 50 or 60% of the money you're borrowing is in short-term instruments. It's a recipe for disaster. But the fact is that we're going to try to address it now. We're not going to try to address it alone. There's some very difficult decisions we're going to have to make. But we're also mindful that the unemployed, the pensioners, and people who've been living below the poverty line have been carrying a huge burden by themselves. And so that any policies that we adopt moving forward has to address their needs and must take into consideration their own living standards. So that is why I'm very grateful to have the assistance of the CDB and everybody else. It's our job to make sure that we be the voice for those people and think creatively out of the box to make sure that we can address these concerns moving forward.
You indicated that, excuse me, you indicated that difficult decisions have to be made, and one can argue that austerity measures is a reality eventually. What is your position on that? Is that totally off the table?
Difficult decisions and austerity are two very different things. Austerity is when you've gotten to the point where you're given no choice. And austerity generally means that you've got to live with the reality. In the short term, you're not going to be able to increase the amount of money that you're generating, and the only way you can stop the bleeding is to cut cost. So tough decisions are where you want to reallocate resources to. So it means that some programs will go away, and that you're going to spend more money in other programs. Those are some of the tough decisions. So the fact is that there isn't enough money to do all the things that we want to be able to do. So somebody has to make that call. And right now, if in fact you're not seeing growth, the emphasis has to be in spending money in growth areas. So let's take a classic example. The government approved, or the government borrowed $65 million to do a office complex in View Fort, 75,000 square feet. That's a tough call. The project is already underway. As a government, I can say to you that we feel that that's the wrong way to spend the money. Because even after the project is completed, the staff to go in there are going to increase recurrent expenditure. It's not going to be a project that's going to generate additional revenue. So we're looking at transferring that loan once the new board is in place. It's to meet with the board, convince them, stop that project, use the funds now to do a subdivision of a land in Ansab, where we put in water, electricity, and sewage, open up lands for development, and get now good incentives to get solutions to be, so they can build restaurants, they can build hotels, they can build shops, they can build residential facilities in 44 acres across the street from the Ansab beach. Growing the capacity of your country, and you now come in and you're creating more economic activity. That economic activity is not being driven or being paid for by taxpayers. You're building the capacity, and that is coming from foreigners coming into Saint Lucia. So those are some of the tough decisions that we have to be able to make right now. In healthcare, okay, we have to get to a healthcare insurance program, because government does not have the capacity to continue to be self-insurers. So we're spending $110 million a year. Estimates are that recurrent expenditure on one hospital alone is going to increase by $50 million. If you can go to a healthcare insurance program, and it means now that when solutions go to the hospital, the insurance is paying for those bills. But it's going to require solutions to be able to make a contribution to that healthcare insurance. So people who are working, whether it's in the public sector or in the private sector, will be obligatory for them to have insurance. Part of their salary will be going to pay for that premium. What we're trying to do is to increase the numbers of people participating in that insurance program, so the premium can come down, and maybe even the amount of services that are covered under that insurance program is increased. But that's a reality, because continuing going the way that we're going right now, it's not going to work. We can see what the quality of the healthcare is. So those are some of the tough decisions, but that's not austerity. Austerity will be if we don't listen to this and we continue fooling ourselves, we continue running deficits, we'll get a point where people are not going to buy our treasury bills, okay? And the only persons you can turn to as a country at that point when there's that cash shortage is the IMF. And I can go to the IMF.com or .org, and I can show you what a structural adjustment program looks like, and it's not pretty.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you.
Now I wonder if we can get the benefit of some of those questions. He has to go.
Yes, really has a practical.
Can we just start with him, please,
Sure.
Mr. Prime Minister?
Sarah,
So I will come to you. Yeah. Okay, just like this. Sarah? Yes, good day. Dr. Smith?
Yes,
Yes, Richmond Felix from the Government Information Service.
yes.
Just very briefly, we know that you have to go. From your perspective, how have the discussions been with the local officials, including the Prime Minister and his team, by virtue of what you discussed with them today?
Well, I think I can honestly say that we've been very encouraged by what we have heard. What we have observed is a very, very strong, a very strong desire to address the country's problems and address them frontally. Sorry, my apologies.
My apologies.
Yeah. That is precisely what we feel is necessary in the Caribbean today, for governments to take responsibility for the challenges that their countries face and apply the appropriate solutions. We at the Caribbean Development Bank, we feel that our role is to work with these governments. We don't make policy. What we do as an institution is we provide advice on policy, and we also provide financing for projects which can help with the economic and social development of our foreign member countries. That's our role. And much of the discussion here between last night and today was around both issues, both policy and project financing.
So what would be your expectations now that you're leaving, based on, again, the discussions that you had?
Well, there are some concrete things to which we agreed. One was to assist the government of Saint Lucia and the Prime Minister in particular to get a better understanding of where the country is at, that we have described as a diagnostic of the current macroeconomic situation in Saint Lucia, that we are committed to doing. There are also a number of projects which are underway. Some have been approved, some are still in the pipeline. What we want to do is to execute with alacrity so that the country can begin to benefit from those investments. Those are our priorities.
Thank you, Dr. Smith, and we won't keep you back anymore. We will just wrap up.
Okay,
with the
thank
Prime
you very
Minister.
much.
Thank you very much again, also. Thank you so much for
We'll
talk soon, okay? Okay. Be assured on the situation. But I think what's good is it has to come to an end. And I think that, as you and I discussed, the version.
Thanks, gentlemen.
Ready? Yes, Prime Minister Alan Chasney. Well, you've met with the officials of the CDB and the delegation here, somewhat of a fact-finding mission as to what measures that your administration will be putting in place, again, coming in, inheriting a budget well in train as well. Can you give us an indication, in summary, of what the discussions, especially this morning leading into this afternoon, centered around?
First of all, it was for us to be able to benefit as to which projects are presently underway, which projects have already been approved, and then how do we move planning forward. So the timing of our entry as a government is actually pretty good. They're just finishing the end of the 3 years. So 2017 gives us the opportunity to plan for the next 3 years. There are obviously some things, the water projects, that we're very concerned about in terms of getting them implemented, particularly in Dennery and in Vieux Fort, as well as the dam. All are critical projects. The implementation have not begun yet. So we have to try to see what we can do to expedite the implementation. The other area that we've spoken about is bringing a team down, which would be CDB, the Central Bank, IMF and World Bank, to naturally get a snapshot of where our economy is. Make some projections in terms of if we continue doing what we're doing now, what it's going to lead to. and therefore then look at some of the alternatives that are available to us. We want to do this on a collective basis so that we get their support, because obviously we're going to probably need some financing to fill the gaps that we have. So it's important to get their buy-in, and it means if you're going to get buy-in, then you need to open yourself up. So we're very amenable to listening to what they have to say. We're going to fight very hard for the things that we believe in, and one of them is that in moving forward, that the more vulnerable people in our society don't continue to pay the heavy price that they have been with regards to the economic growth. We're not seeing enough economic growth. We have said that we want to double the economy in 10 years, which means that we have to be making some initial investments. We have to reprioritize where we're spending some of our money in order to make sure that that's going to take place. And we want to make sure that we get buy-in from our regional partners in moving forward in that direction.
Okay. Were any next steps and any timelines set at this point as to when we can expect some of those changes, and what are some of the next steps from your perspective?
We will know within the next 2 days when the follow-up meeting is going to be with the wider group, and how long that process is going to take. So that's priority number one. There were some of the projects that we reviewed, and they needed some immediate decisions. Some we were able to make today. Some are going to require review on our part. There's a new fund that came in from the British government. We need to send in our priority list. That needs to be done in a very short period of time. So we've agreed to make that happen. And we've agreed that later this year, the planning process for 2017 to 2020 will begin, which will coincide with our own budget process. So one of the things that we're going to do is when we do the budget, even though we're approving the budget on an annual basis, we are going to, in our minds and on paper, have a budget for the next 4 years, right? So that it can change on a yearly basis, but at least we know the direction that we're going to be going in. And we've solicited their support and their assistance in designing that budget moving forward.
And now that you speak about the budget, I know yesterday we had the throne speech by Excellency, and it was mentioned that we had the debate on the estimates but not on the policy issues. Again, how soon do you see we going into that aspect of the budget cycle from this year?
So what we're doing right now is we've asked all the ministries to review their expenditure and come up with a policy framework for it. Internally, we'll determine whether we agree with that and make whatever amendments we want to. So I would say to you that no sooner than September, but no later than October, is when we expect to be able to come to Parliament and pronounce on where we're going. And you will appreciate that the budget cycle for next year begins right away. So again, that's why this is an important aspect. So this starts moving us in the right direction, but the real budget for this government will really be the budget that we're going to present in April of next year. But it doesn't mean we're not going to be making decisions. We are going to be making decisions. We will be looking to fulfill our manifesto promises of fight to stay alive. That will be completed by no later than October. All of the things in fight to stay alive.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Minister. Okay. We can do it there.
We'll go back to our office.
Oh, I could have done it at the desk, but if you wanted a different
approach, not
I
projects.
know, especially more kind of a technocrat.
Technocrat side policy.
Policy,
Yeah,
okay, good. We're speaking with the Minister in the Ministry of Finance, Dr. Ubaldas Raven. Okay, Minister, with regards to the CDB mission to Saint Lucia from last evening into this afternoon, can you give us an indication of what are the steps and what was discussed during the meeting as far as that approach that you.
Well, as you know, we are new government, and CDB is one of our institutions where we borrow money from, and we find it very prudent to meet with the staff, the president, to share with him and to share with them the broad vision that this government has for Saint Lucia. We want to ensure that the vision that we have falls in line with that of the CDB, especially for the wider Caribbean. And one of the vexing issues that we know for sure that Caribbean islands are faced with is that of debt. And we wanted to ensure or to inform the CDB that the government is putting in place measures in which whereby such debts would be reduced or controlled. One of the things that we intend to do very soon is to establish what we refer to as budget, actually performance-based budgeting. And what that is to ensure that when we have our budget cycle, whatever budget we put in place, the budget is tied to certain targets, certain limits, and that will be gauged or monitored on a monthly or quarterly basis to ensure that the various limits, the various controls, fiscal controls, the various fiscal limits and targets are met. So when you have ministries or ministers coming with wish list, we want to make sure that the wish list actually fits within those limits. So what will help us in achieving that goal also is what we refer to as a medium fiscal policy framework. It is from that framework we'll be able to put our various disciplines or controls in place as far as fiscal policy is concerned. So that, and the CDB was very impressed with the fact that we are moving in that direction, and hopefully we intend to see this in the next budget cycle, because as I said earlier, the budget issue, the debt issue in Saint Lucia is something that we take very seriously as a government, and we will do all that it takes to ensure that it is either controlled or reduced.
Okay. So from what I'm hearing, you say that a system of monitoring and evaluation will be instituted going forward, a very stringent one.
Yes.
There was also talk about a diagnostic approach, even at bringing in these partners, the CDB, the IMF, etc. Can you just give us a little more insight on what the diagnostics involves?
Well, again, we are a new government, and what we want to ensure is that we want to find out where we are or what we have inherited, the fiscal position of the government upon resuming or taking on the reins of governance as of June 6th. So we want to, it's not a witch hunt, it's just to find out what we inherited and how much space we have. We have to know where we are if we need to know, if we have to go where we intend to go. Okay? So, so that's what we intend to have the CDB and the other regional bodies, not regional but international, the IMF and the ECCB. We have asked them to form a joint group in assisting us in giving us that diagnostic. Well, we have a budget we have to deal with. We cannot just wait until that diagnostic is done. We have to run the operations of government. So, but in the meantime, we will know where we are. Hopefully in the next few months we will get a feel as to what we have inherited as a new government.
Okay. Thank you, Minister.
Sure.
Yeah. Good luck with that.
Thank you.
Most welcome. Good afternoon, Minister. We're speaking with, I cannot get all of the portfolios correct as yet, but the Honorable Guy Joseph, Minister with responsibility. Just remind us again.
Economic planning, housing and urban renewal, transportation, civil aviation,
That's a whole lot.
telecoms.
Okay. We have just wrapped up Saint Lucia, and you, as one of the ministers of cabinet on the Prime Minister's team who engaged the CDB's mission, of the CDB president over a little less than a day's mission to Saint Lucia. Can you give from your perspective what were the discussions like and what was the engagement like?
Well, I must say, we had a very good session with the CDB. Some of it started last night from some preliminary discussions we had on issues that we wanted to deal with. It's quite a big portfolio that CDB has in terms of project implementation in Saint Lucia. At this point in time, while a few projects are winding down, but there are still many projects in the pipeline that is to be rolled out. Some of the projects of major concern would be what is happening in the education sector. Also, we have seen the projects with the street lighting and the energy saving bulb project, which is funded through CDB in partnership with Lucilec, which we should see some savings being brought in as a result of this project. We have seen some of the housing projects where funding was made available through a line at the Development Bank through CDB. That is one of the issues that I raised with CDB in terms of the requirements for accessing these funds, especially with the Moshi Housing Development Project. But I must say, overall, the general perception and the way forward looks very good in terms of the relationship with CDB and the type of projects that they are implementing. A number of concerns were raised with them. I did raise the issue of qualification requirements of local contractors and being able to build local capacity sufficiently to allow our locals to be able to participate in a meaningful way. Because over the years, some of the problems we've seen is that while our local contractors are unable to qualify to maybe get the job from CDB or other international funding agencies, when the works are issued to an international contractor, it is subcontracted at a much lower cost to the local contractors who are expected to execute the work below the actual cost, and whether in the process this compromises the speedy execution of the works in some of the instances. And I must tell you, the bank was very receptive to the concerns that were raised, and I am sure that we are going to have a lot more dialogue on this in terms of moving forward. Because what I would love to see in St. Lucia is that we can build our local contractors to the capacity where they themselves can now tender and go and take jobs in other CDB member countries. Because for too long I've seen it look like a lot of other contractors can come to St. Lucia and execute work, but our local contractors are not getting the equal opportunity to go out there. And I've even spoken to them about possibly packaging works in a manner that would help to build some local capacity.
Okay, thank you very much for that. And you spoke about not only the speed, but I guess of the quality of work.
Yes.
Minister, may parler koyal bien, but may just play ou di tout ça ou di moins en koyol.
Well, nou ten un bon meeting jodi avec se moun Development Bank Kawaib la. Nou pale ak yo a sou plize chize nou bouzwen adwese. Nou pale about se bulk nef la yo ni pou meye a sou se la ou ya ka bay pli klete e ki kay sauve gouvernement l'ajan an sa nou ka paye Lucilec tout le l'année pou se like la ki tout an long chime an Saint Lucia. Nou kwe se un bon projet et nou ka bay support nou pou projet a kon nou kay kontine ale douvan a sou projet sa. Nou aussi parle ak yo about se kay la ki fet an Monchi ek l'ajan yo te me en place en Banque Développement Saint Lucia pou sa ende moun jwen se loan nan yo bezwen pou achete se kay sa. Mwen te ka pale ek yo si lon sa yo me en plas ek akodi si yo sa bese eme hose requirement ki la si lon situasyon because i ka pa wet se moun nan ki te bat se kay la te bati pou yo te pren la pitet yo pa sa achete ek se kay la jes la pa ni lot moun paske se weg la ki en plas la nou ni pou suiv li. So yo ja d'akor pou viye gade a dan sa ek pale ek nou pou gade ki manye nou kay wanje sa pou ale douvan. Yon se point mwen te really ka pale ek yo asu. Se pou ende se moun Saint Lucia, contractor Saint Lucia pou sa kwalifiye pou jwen travay an ba sa ka fet an CDB. Nou ka wanchay moun ka sot lot peyi ka vini ek yo sa kwalifay pou fet travay an Saint Lucia. Mais ces contracteurs nous Saint Lucia quand yo pas ça lancer les autres pays et joindre même qualification pour ça faire ces travail là nous besoin bâti ces travailleurs local so les yo aller dehors yo kay ça joindre travail même comme monde dehors ka joindre travail ici et moi parler avec banque là c'est mon ka représenter banque là pour garder les yo ka développer ces projets si yo ça baisser se weg la yo ka me en place la pou moun Saint Lucien même sa qualifié pour faire travail la. Yon se raison a mwen ka vous dwe wè sa fait parce que laisse moun international ben Jean l'autre place joindre ce travail la. Yo ka bay Jean Saint Lucie pour faire travail la mais adan prix qui top pli bas ek bénéfice la ka ale pour yo mais c'est still se moun Saint Lucia qui ka fait travail la. Et parce que travail la pate a sou non yo en premier pas yo still pas a qualifié l'autre quoi pour ça faire ce travail là so nous ka travail a sou ça et yon se bay la moi ka essayer pour faire diwan tant ça mon gouvernement c'est pour aider bâti ces moun Saint Lucia qui engagé en ces différents travail là dat nous ka ouais en yon de l'année pour venir n'importe place en Caraïbe là nous kay ça ni contracteur qui kay qualifié pour ça aller et faire travail là mais moi bien satisfait avec discussion nous teni et puis c'est mon banque développement Caraïbe là et moi ka quoi date qu'on nous kay continuer travailler avec yo la kay na chay bénéfice qui kay venir pour Saint Lucia.
Merci appeal. Thank you Minister very much for that.
You're welcome sir.
Us in all
Okay.
and both of our tongues.
All right.
Okay. Have a good one.
Thank you.
Provide food for us. And especially, this is the bedrock of our economy, you know. This is what will sustain us. The Creole gardens. That is how our